The disappearance of the young princes, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York, in 1483 remains one of history's most enduring and chilling mysteries. A royal murder case steeped in political intrigue, familial ambition, and lingering questions that continue to fascinate and frustrate historians. Edward Faust, the heir presumptive to the English throne, was just 13 years old when his world dramatically and irrevocably changed. His younger brother, Richard, was just 8, and their lives were inextricably bound to the volatile currents of English politics following the sudden death of their father, King Edward IV. Edward IV's death, following a short illness, plunged the kingdom into a succession crisis, revealing a viper's nest of competing claims and ruthless maneuvering. The most immediate and potent threat came from Richard, Duke of Gloucester, Edward IV's brother, a man of formidable intellect, ambition, and, increasingly, a reputation for ruthlessness. Richard had long been a significant figure in the Yorkist court, known for his military prowess and his influence over the young king's uncle, Edward IV. However, whispers of Richard's ambition had circulated for years, suggesting he harbored a desire for the throne himself. When Edward IV died, Richard swiftly moved to seize control, declaring himself protector of the realm and the young Edward V's guardian. He challenged the legitimacy of Edward V's claim, citing allegations that Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville was invalid, thus disinheriting Edward V and his brother. These allegations, propagated by Bishop Robert Stillington and others, were devastating, throwing into doubt the entire lineage of Edward V and his claim to the throne. With the backing of Parliament, Richard orchestrated the deposition of Edward V, preventing his coronation and effectively stripping him of any remaining authority. The young princes were then moved from the safety of the Tower of London, traditionally a royal residence, to a more isolated part of the fortress, marking a significant turning point in their fate. Initially, they were housed with their mother, Elizabeth Woodville, but Richard soon separated them, confining them to different chambers within the tower. Elizabeth Woodville, a formidable and politically astute woman, was effectively held captive by Richard, her movements and communications severely restricted. As the months passed, communication with the princes ceased, fueling rumors and growing anxieties about their well-being. Officially, the princes were reported to be well, but the lack of independent verification and the increasingly tense political climate raised serious concerns. Then, in the spring of 1484, news arrived that both Edward V and Richard had died, officially attributed to sickness. Richard promptly declared himself king, consolidating his power and silencing any immediate challenges to his rule. However, the deaths of the princes were never fully accepted, and suspicions of foul play persisted, casting a dark shadow over Richard III's reign. The most compelling and enduring accusation points directly at Richard III himself, alleging he orchestrated their murders to eliminate his rivals and secure the throne. This theory, popularized by Tudor historians, who benefited politically from Richard's downfall, portrays Richard as a ruthless tyrant who stopped at nothing to achieve his ambitions. However, the evidence is complex and circumstantial, and alternative explanations have also been proposed. Some historians argue that the princes died of natural causes, perhaps exacerbated by the harsh conditions of the Tower of London. Others suggest they were killed by agents of a rival claimant, perhaps Henry Tudor, who would eventually overthrow Richard III and claim the throne. Still others propose that they were simply hidden away, alive but in hiding, to prevent them from being used as pawns in future power struggles. The discovery of skeletal remains at the Tower of London in 1674 reignited the debate and offered tantalizing, though ultimately inconclusive, evidence. These remains, initially believed to be those of the princes, were later subjected to scientific analysis, which cast doubt on their authenticity. However, a recent DNA analysis, conducted in 2013, confirmed that one skeleton was indeed that of Edward V, and the other was likely his brother, Richard. This discovery, while confirming their deaths, did not definitively determine the cause or circumstances surrounding their demise. The evidence pointing to Richard's involvement centers on several key factors: his swift actions to depose Edward V, his subsequent declaration of kingship, and the testimonies of individuals who claim to have overheard incriminating conversations. The most notable of these testimonies comes from Sir Henry Stafford, who allegedly confessed on his deathbed that he and Lord Hastings had been commanded by Richard to kill the princes. However, Stafford's confession occurred years after the prince's disappearance and is considered by many historians to be unreliable, potentially motivated by a desire to curry favor with the Tudor dynasty. Furthermore, the alleged confession was not publicly disclosed until the Tudor era, raising questions about its authenticity and potential manipulation. The accusations against Lord Hastings, another powerful figure in Richard's court, also complicate the picture, as Hastings was executed on suspicion of treason shortly after the princes disappeared. Some historians argue that Hastings was a scapegoat, sacrificed to deflect suspicion from Richard himself. Others believe Hastings was genuinely involved in a plot against Richard, and his execution was a preemptive measure to eliminate a potential rival. The Tudor perspective, heavily influenced by propaganda aimed at discrediting Richard III and legitimizing Henry VII's reign, played a significant role in shaping the historical narrative. Tudor historians, such as Polydore Vergil and Thomas More, portrayed Richard as a ruthless and power-hungry tyrant who eliminated his nephews to seize the throne. Their accounts, while influential, must be viewed with caution, considering their clear bias in favor of the Tudor dynasty. The discovery of a tomb believed to be that of Edward V and Richard in Westminster Abbey in 1674 further fueled speculation and romanticized the prince's plight. Although initially identified as the princes, these remains were later deemed to be of uncertain identity, further complicating the mystery. The 2013 DNA analysis, while confirming the identities of the remains, could not establish the cause of death. Some experts suggest the bones showed signs of trauma, but the evidence is inconclusive and open to interpretation. The possibility of natural causes, such as tuberculosis or other infectious diseases, cannot be ruled out. The mystery of the princes in the tower remains one of the most enduring and captivating unsolved cases in English history. The lack of definitive evidence, coupled with the passage of centuries, makes it impossible to definitively determine the truth. However, the story continues to fascinate and inspire debate, reminding us of the complexities of historical interpretation and the enduring power of unsolved mysteries. The legacy of the princes in the tower serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition, the fragility of power, and the enduring consequences of political intrigue. Ultimately, the disappearance of Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury remains an enigma, a tragic chapter in English history that continues to haunt the nation's collective memory.